Hello and welcome everybody to our YOPD Women's First Council. We're really excited to be doing this. Last year we did a YOPD Council and it was so popular that we decided we're going to do a YOPD Women's Council. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Research at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and I am here today with several standing members of the council, and we have a special guest today, Kathleen Reardon. I'm going to go around and just give you a quick hello to everybody who's on this council. And then as we dive in more to the content today, everyone will get a chance to talk to you a little bit about who they are and their story. So Karen, hello. Can you wave hi to everybody? There. Karen and Dr. Sonia Mather. She's a one of our board of directors members, and she's been a friend of the foundation for a really long time. She's helped with a lot of our webinars, and she's also one of the co-founders of PD Avengers. Hello. Kat Hill is one of our Davis Phinney Foundation ambassadors. She's been a really big part of all of the work that we do. We're so grateful for our ambassadors. Karen is also an ambassador, and Kat is going to be moderating today. Hello, Kat.
Well, hello. Everybody's calling in and saying hello at the same time. Forgive me.
Oh, that's good. Gaynor Edwards, she is the founder of YOPD, Insight YOPD, and she's from Spotlight YOPD. Insight Spotlight, I'm missing my mind. She's in the UK, and she's calling in from there tonight, and she misses her nights at the pubs. So she's just hanging out with us as much as she can. And then Heather Kennedy is calling in, and she's part of our YOPD Council and now also our Women's Council. How you doing, Heather?
Pretty good.
Great. So I'm so glad to have all of you here. I'm going to turn this over now to Kat, and I'll just be back here in the background. Okay, take it away, Kat.
Hi, thanks, Mel. I'll try to not have any more phone calls during. I put myself on airplane mode. So welcome. We're really excited to be here today. This is really a first in many ways. As young onset women who have Parkinson's disease, we're sort of the smallest of the small population in terms of how we're represented in Parkinson's disease because there's the fewest numbers of us. So I feel really excited that we have a forum to talk about what's unique to women. We debated a little bit whether this should be for all women or young onset women. We hope that all women will feel welcome joining us. We're going to focus on issues that are specific to women, and we all probably know we do better with women. We connect with women. When women are connecting with women, there's actually something that happens physiologically. There's neuropeptides that are released that make us feel better. And we all probably intuitively know that and connect with women. But I just want to say that us having an opportunity to do this here is not only good for our information and our knowledge, but it's actually really good for us. So I'm really excited to be here today. What I'm hoping is that each of us here on the panel will share a little bit about their diagnosis story and some of the symptoms that they experienced, especially at the beginning. And if any of those felt unique because they were female, or things that maybe happened in their Parkinson's journey that were unique to being female. So I'd like to go last. Who wants to kick us off? All right, Karen, yeah.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here. And Kathleen, it's great to be here with you and all the other ladies. I was diagnosed at age 47, and for a period of several years before my diagnosis, I had a lot of symptoms which I sort of wrote off to middle age or perimenopausal. I felt it just never even occurred to me for several years to think possibly that I had Parkinson's disease, even though my father, his mother, and her sister had Parkinson's. It was the last thing that I thought of. And my father was diagnosed actually at a young age as well. And I just, wrote off sort of the sore muscles and the aching body and even the tremor, which I thought was a stressful job. I was a nurse anesthetist, and I had a lot of stress at work, and I just wrote a lot of these things off to middle age. So when I did get a diagnosis and was able to funnel my energy in a more positive, forward moving direction and find other women to relate to, I felt more at home. So I'm glad to be here.
Thanks, Karen. Who wants to go next? How about you, Heather?
I was just over on Clubhouse in a group of women who identify as 50 and over. And we were talking about life transitions and how we shifted from maybe a more competitive nature that we might have had when we were younger to a more inclusive, collaborative way of looking at life. And what I really enjoy about this group in particular is the collaborative becomes visionary. We are hoping to change the face of Parkinson's by using our collective skills, and everybody has something to bring to the table, and we are lifting that and working with each other and seeing where we can drop in and share resources and inviting everyone in so that we can make these changes. So this is just so exciting. I know you asked about diagnosis, so I'll be quick. Of course, I have the same story. It was all in my head. They tried every possible drug on the market because it was all in my head. And finally, I saw a doctor who looked at me and said, 100% you have Parkinson's, but I'm going to run you through all the tests. First, I had lupus, they said. Then I had fibromyalgia, they said. Then I had, I might have had, what is it? The deer tick disease, Lyme. Then they just told me that I was crazy, which might also be true. But I think the important thing to note is keep asking until you get answers, because not having a diagnosis is really rough. And we do question our sanity enough because our dopamine is not really there. So just keep asking until you get the answers.
That's great advice, Heather. I like that. I like that a lot. And anybody feel free to chime in too if we have questions. Gaynor, you wanna chat? I can't see everybody.
Sorry, my mouse is always on the wrong side. Yeah, that whole thing with it being all in your head, I think that is a worry. And I'm sure it takes women longer to get to that final diagnosis than it does for men. Mine was basically, it was like giving birth, I imagine. I have a dog. But it took 9 months. So it was, they went through all the process. But the initial thing is always, the GP and the neurologist both tested my reflexes. They're too good, that won't be Parkinson's. Mm. And it's the way, I don't know whether it's, do they deliver it as badly? I guess whether you're male or female, maybe. I think there needs to be a bit more of a rule book sometimes with how you approach this stuff. And when it was actually the day of my diagnosis, I was shifted from an early morning appointment to an end of the day appointment. Da, da, da. So, at that point you think, well, that doesn't look good.
Yeah. Interesting. So I'm hearing kind of a theme. Sonia, how about you, love?
I'm probably going to break the mold because mine was pretty boring in terms of diagnosis. I was pregnant with my first child at the time and finishing a residency in family medicine, and my right pinky started twitching intermittently. And I, of course, like anyone in the medical profession, ignored it and said, hopefully it would go away, but it didn't. It became more concerning. And then my husband said, he's also a physician. He said, you've got to go get it checked out. So I went to a colleague of mine on a lunch break, and he just walked me up and down the hall, did all the sort of clinical testing that they do, and said, I think you have young onset Parkinson's. It was very, very quick, very brief. Of course, I didn't believe him and thought his clinical skills were a little bit lax, but I got referred on to a movement disorder specialist, and he sort of corroborated that diagnosis. So I was 28 at the time when I was diagnosed.
Interesting. I want to circle back, Sonia, after we all introduce ourselves and tell our stories about what it was like to be pregnant with Parkinson's, because that's unique to women, at least so far. Let's see. Kathleen, do you have anything to add or throw in here?
Just the fact that it's the stories are, you know, they're fairly common. I mean, even though Sonia, yours was different, I mean, there was some delay, even though you were around doctors. And there's an element, well, if some of you said you'd read what I'd written, and there's an element of disbelief that women have to get past, and that doesn't just happen with Parkinson's. I was misdiagnosed with breast cancer for 1.5 years when I was 30. And so, you know, after that, I was very, very careful about making sure that I was very assertive about my health, but it still took a while to get diagnosed with Parkinson's.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think for those of us that are talking about sort of the denial piece, that was definitely a part of my story, that even though my dad and several family members had Parkinson's, they were all older when they were diagnosed, and they were all men. And so I ignored symptoms for quite a good while, like a good healthcare provider as a nurse practitioner. You know, I was sure that it wasn't even on my radar, frankly. And but in hindsight, I'm curious to hear from others too. In hindsight, are there things that were happening that now you think might be Parkinson's? I know for me that I struggled quite a while with anxiety and depression before I had sort of the twitch and the head bob and excuse me, some of the more classic Parkinson's symptoms. And I wonder sometimes, you know, that was probably some of the onset of Parkinson's, and it is that all in your head piece. Are we missing some of that clinically, especially with women, I wonder? I'm going to open that up for discussion. Yeah, Karen, just jump in.
Yeah, I can relate to that tremendously. I think one of the earliest symptoms I had, looking back, I can tell this now, was acute onset of anxiety. You know, I had 20 years of experience doing anesthesia in a pretty aggressive academic medical center. I did big cases. I was very good at what I did. I'm experienced enough to function at a high level in that setting. And suddenly I was finding myself overwhelmed during emergencies, freezing mentally and physically, not able to respond in ways. And I really just thought, oh, I'm aging. This is too much for me. I need an easier job. I'm getting burnt out. And really, I was having acute anxiety as an early presenting symptom of Parkinson's disease. And I remember thinking at the time of maybe changing jobs and going to an easier place to work. And it was sort of this general thing that I found among nurses, which were primarily female and advanced practice nurses who I was working with in the medical field, that as you age, you just sort of move on to greener pastures in medicine. And when I finally presented with motor symptoms and got a diagnosis, it was sort of a confirmation that all of that was not in my head. You know, I really felt badly about myself because my performance was declining. And now I can gently and be, you know, kind to myself and say, wow, that was an early presenting symptom of a brain disorder.
Gaynor, I see your question. Kathleen, I'm curious if you can share with us some of what you've learned about this process and learned about women specifically and diagnosis, because you know you're here sort of as our expert, and I'd love to use you to dive in here. Thanks, Gaynor, for standing by.
Well, although I've studied gender issues a lot in my career, I think the expertise I might have it has been gotten firsthand, because there wasn't a lot to read, you know, about women. In fact, I wrote a couple of articles for the Michael J. Fox Foundation, and that took a bit actually to, you know, say we really need to look at women, because I was a woman saying it, you know, but we really did need to look more at women, because most of the time the people that you would see who had Parkinson's, they were men. And if they were celebrities, they were usually men too. And it was very difficult to identify, totally anyway, because like a lot of you, I was probably around 48 or 49 when I was beginning to realize that something was off. See, I was beginning to think I had breast cancer again. My husband and I had a wedding renewal because I had had breast cancer when we got married. And we said, 15 years from now, we're going to have a wedding renewal no matter what. And so we had a beautiful wedding renewal, but I remember not feeling quite right. I looked great. And maybe this happens to a lot of you because, especially since you're so young, you're all lovely. And people will look at you, at your face and say, well, you look great, but that really doesn't have a lot to do with Parkinson's, and I have a lot of women say to me, what do I say to that? If I say, well, I'm not really great, it's like I'm denying the validity of what they just said. And I don't want to be complaining, but it kind of tells me to never talk to that person about it again, because they just wanted to say something. They just wanted to say, I look awfully good, which makes you feel that, once again, like some of you said you felt before the diagnosis, as if you're making this up or something, that it's not real. And I found I looked into that, and women were experiencing that more often. I became very aware of my doctors too, and how they were managing it once I finally found a doctor who thought I had Parkinson's. And I've mentioned to my doctors that I don't want to, I don't say it rudely, but I don't really want the word complaint in my file. And, my doctors will say, that's what we were taught. We're supposed to say the patient complained about this and the patient complained about that. And I said, well, you can do that with your male patients, but don't do it with me, because there's something about a woman complaining. So if you want to say, Kathleen explained, or she described, or she elaborated, or whatever it might be. And, the doctors I have took that to heart, and they actually did make those changes, and they talked to their fellows about it. And one of them introduced me to them and had me talk to them about it, because he said, this is a study that needs to be done, because maybe we are treating our female patients differently. And perhaps even by using those words, we're treating them differently. I'm just, when I'm listening to you, I'm going back to being, 48 or 49, and I didn't get diagnosed till 52. So there were a few years in there, just like many of you, where not having it identified seemed to me worse than having it identified. Once I knew I had Parkinson's, I'm not saying that it was, an exciting thing. And like many of you, my mother had Parkinson's. And yet, once again, I didn't think that's what I had initially, because my symptoms were not balance related, well, a little bit, but they were more cognition. And as a professor, I was a professor of business and preventive medicine, and the students would ask me questions, and normally I would just love, I'd be ahead of them. I found myself saying, can you ask that question again? It's a little like what you were talking about, Karen. And that I was thinking, well, wait a minute now, am I getting too old for teaching? That was actually a sign. And then because you figure out one sign, you begin to reflect on the others. But my experience has been, you have to be your own advocate, especially as a woman. I know that because I have other health issues, and every doctor I meet agrees. I remember saying to one of my doctors, I said, I read some more research recently about how women are treated differently, and sometimes, and this is a heart doctor, and sometimes they don't get the kind of treatment that a man will get. And I said, what's your response to that? And his response to that is, the research is accurate. And I said, well, geez, what are we going to do about that? And he said, well, I've always treated you like a man anyway, Kathleen. And I said, okay, but what about everybody else? But I knew what he meant. He has a great sense of humor, and he had the honesty to tell me that the research was accurate. And he said, I think you have to be very straightforward with us. You have to not, let us tell you what we think it is or what's going on. You have to be a partner with us. So he's obviously a very good doctor.
I love that. I think words do matter. Words do matter, no matter where you're writing them. Gaynor, you had a question. Thank you so much, love, for waiting.
You're welcome, love. I think there's something there, we're talking about how it gets discounted by the doctors that, it's all in your head. But I think a lot of women go there thinking this is stress. That that seems to be the sort of default thing for a lot of people, that it's, I was certainly going through a stressful time. And I think now that I know more about it, I think that was my trigger. But at the time, I just thought it was all, part of the stressful stuff I was going through. Why wouldn't a frozen shoulder and insomnia and depression, why wouldn't that all be stress? But I don't know whether blokes report men blokes report as much stress as an initial kind of whether they think that it's stress related when they first go to the doctor. Usually you hear that the guys say, they had a blow to the head, maybe that's where they think their Parkinson's came from, whereas women think it's more sort of emotional trauma.
Mm-hmm. I think it's interesting too that with the exception of Sonia, all of us were diagnosed, well, and Heather, I think you drop out of that, but that perimenopause time. So I think for me personally, it was easy to write off not sleeping well, and I came at everything as a women's healthcare provider that, it must just be, midlife. I was forgetting things cognitively. I was having trouble as well. So, and I do think women tend to process more verbally, right? So we often come in with maybe more verbose complaints or reports of, or experiences of to the provider. So, yeah, I'd be curious to hear, Sonia, a little bit what it was like for you, partly as a physician and as a wife of a physician and as a pregnant woman, about your process during pregnancy and then after delivery too. I'd be curious to hear if that shifted at all for you.
Yeah, my oldest is now 22, so this is quite a while ago. And I had two more girls since then. They're now 19 and 16.
Wow.
And actually 20 and 16. And it was different for each of those pregnancies. My symptoms would be amplified because I couldn't take the medications that I was going to take, because there was so little known about the possibility of injuring the fetus because of certain medications. So I stuck to very, very basics, like taking beta blockers a little bit at certain times in the pregnancy for my tremor and things like that. The first one was just a normal delivery. No one was very excited about it. I ended up with a C-section. The second one, I went for genetic testing and counseling, and they sort of lit the match because no one really knew what to do with me. So then, that delivery, I had 5 people in the room. And then the next delivery, I had, just the regular care again. So that it was interesting because, as a physician, or when you're in the medical business, you tend to rely on studies and research and evidence. And there really was no evidence, even in terms of medications, or very sparse evidence, but what I should be taking, what I shouldn't be taking. Is the delivery a complicated one or not? So it was very unnerving from that perspective, not knowing what to do. But
Do you
it
think
posts
it's
to
gotten
everyone.
better, Sonia? Do you think it's gotten better over time? Do we have more data?
You know, I'm not into, I don't think it's where it should be 22 years later. I
would-
think there are a lot more young women that are going through the same thing that I went through and really don't have much more knowledge. Maybe the genetic counseling might be more part of the or the obstetrical referral care, but you know, I haven't come, and I could be wrong, somebody else might know, but I haven't come across any major studies that have looked into this aspect, and it's an important one. It's an important one for sure.
Too. Heather, you have your hand up.
At first I did that accidentally, but now that I heard what Sonia said, I do have something to add. Can you hear me okay? Oh, good. So I'm so honored to be here with Kathleen too. I've been following Kathleen's work forever, since I was first diagnosed, actually one of the first women that I actually found online. And by the way, has anyone ever told you you resemble Jodie Foster? Wow, just saying. I don't know if that's, I
No,
hope
it's
you,
usually, it used to be Susan Sarandon and.
oh, I'll take either of those, right?
I was okay with that. I don't know which side it is, but.
Both is good. Both are good. Yeah, let's go there.
Not to like anymore, but anyway.
I wanted to say, just to add, that nothing happens in a vacuum. So it's kind of like when I was diagnosed with a food allergy. I have celiac disease, but before I got diagnosed, I tried every process of elimination. It's like, try taking milk out of your diet when you're like a college student or a grad student, and you're like rushing, or you have babies, or try eliminating very specific things, like one at a time, like soy, and then all kinds of different corn, and good luck. So I think the process of elimination with Parkinson's is often difficult for neurologists who aren't movement disorder specialists. And the first doctor I saw was definitely not equipped. So Gaynor is the one who taught me a lot about the women's issues, because she's the first one that I ever knew to approach how the fluctuations in medication prior to our monthly cycles, and those hormonal details. It really is a smorgasbord of sorts. Like, we have all these other things going on simultaneously, and it's really hard to distinguish what's Parkinson's and what's not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How are you finding the menopause, Heather?
Yeah. Sorry, Gaynor, go.
What's that?
I said, how are you finding the menopause, Heather? Because frankly, it's a whole new circle of hell.
I'm fine. Everything's great. Why do you ask?
I call it shaking and baking. Shaking and baking. Cat Hill, shaking and baking. Mm-hmm. Kathleen, I'd be curious to know if you have advice for women about how to advocate. I love the things that you've chosen. So certainly we can advocate that we're not reported as patient complaints of. Are there other tools, do you think, that would be useful for women on this call, and for us too, to glean from?
I probably have quite a few of them. I have a booklet that, well, it's kind of a proposal, and I put it away because I started writing fiction, you know, a couple of crime mysteries after many, many years of academic work. And, but in between, I did write, it's almost a booklet now about communication with Parkinson's. And actually, I wish I had put it in front of me. But we all differ, you know, in our styles of how we communicate. And also we differ as we change, you know, over the years. You know, you might start off kind of, you might be direct, but you might start off kind of more demure. In one of the books I wrote called The Secret Handshake about politics at work, it's some people are, you know, purists when they start out, and they sort of think, well, if you just, you know, work hard, you're going to get ahead. And I think I might have started out that way, but it didn't last long. And then, you know, other people are much more street fighters. And, you know, for a lot of women, for a lot of people, I think particularly women, it's very difficult to become really assertive, even about your health care. And even today, that we're talking today, but you know, like Sonia was saying, I mean, 22 years, there should have been a lot more research. Well, 22 years, there should have been a lot more information on women, that you should have had a hard time finding me. But there isn't enough still. And we do, I think, need to be particularly aware of our own styles. You know, what is your inclination with your doctor? And you know, I can provide you with the types and the styles that I've written about, and you can find yourself, and you know, you can see if there are difficulties. What I found, even though I know how to be assertive, and I know how to do it about my healthcare, at least post breast cancer, I certainly did. I still found that by the time I got to the doctor, and by the time I waited in the waiting room, and by the time I got to the doctor, actually, and in my case, I had to take a train to get to the doctor, so that I was so tired that the me that I would have liked to have had in front of the doctor was not there. And then on top of that, the doctors I started out with anyway did not think I had Parkinson's. And so therefore, I would find myself coming back on the train. This was from Boston to Rhode Island, physically worn out, wondering if I was making it up, wondering if I just hadn't explained myself very well, or whether this doctor just didn't care. And all these things that just created greater exhaustion. You know, as time went on, I became much better at working with my doctor, making sure I had the right doctor, and speaking up. You know, and I mean speaking up. Look, even now, when I go in to see my neurologist in Ireland, I know the first words out of his mouth are going to be exercise. Are you exercising? Which, by the way, I hope to get to that, because that made a tremendous difference. The me you're seeing now was not the me before I really got into Parkinson's exercise. And he'll ask me about whether I'm taking enough Cinemet. And so I've learned with him, especially since he moves very rapidly, I say to him, you know, I just want to assure you that I'm doing that, I'm doing that, and I think you're also going to be asking me about this, and I'm doing that. So, but when I want to talk about today is this and this. And so I kind of don't allow the issues that I've already dealt with to become the issues during our precious 15 minutes or whatever I have. Mm-hmm. And without that, I find myself often listening to a doctor talk about things that I really have already managed, or at least for the large part. And so what I'm trying to say, I hope I'm getting to it, is that you really need to be ready to prevent the meeting from the appointment from going off onto an issue that is relevant for a number of Parkinson's patients, but is maybe perhaps no longer relevant for you. Mm-hmm.
No, I think you nailed it. Yeah,
that takes some confidence in your demeanor. I have one my neurologist in Boston. He tells me, you know, you are, Reardon, the worst patient in the world. And I said, well, you know, I travel 3,000 miles to come and see the worst doctor in the world, so therefore, you know, I guess it's even. And you know, it helps. The rapport allows me to be able to say what my thoughts are on something, and he takes it very well. And I've been told that he's not the kind of doctor that communicates very well. Well, that's not true. He is, at least with me. And so I've tried to find, well, how does my doctor communicate as well? Not just me, what's my style? And are our styles similar to each other, or are we like butting up against each other? And if he or she is an exceptional doctor and I want to hold on to that person, then I'll have that discussion with them. I'll just say, my style is different. And I don't want you to take it the wrong way, but this is how I am nowadays anyway. And usually, that works very well. And I think that rapport is so important. You cannot I've had so many Parkinson's patients, men and women, tell me that the meeting with the doctor, the appointment, gets out of hand, and that they have this list that they made, and they're driving home or riding home or taking a train or whatever, and they see that 3/4 of it was never addressed.
Mhm.
And what was addressed was not what they needed addressed.
Mhm.
And also I found that Parkinson's made me, initially anyway, a little, I don't know if insecure is the right word. I just didn't, I just sort of let things happen to me a little bit more than I probably should have. And now I've discovered ways, and my field is communication, so you'd think I would have been instantly good at it. But I think when you're ill, a lot of things are difficult, very difficult and very confusing. And so you have to have somebody you can, people you can really trust.
Gaynor,
I have an article I wrote, and it's not about Parkinson's, but it sort of shows, it's easily found on the internet, and it's called "Did You Really Say That?" And it's about how to handle situations where people say something unusual or it's semi-insulting, and how ways that you can respond. And I've done the same thing with Parkinson's, is learn ways that I can respond to difficult situations where people have said something, perhaps a doctor, perhaps not a doctor, perhaps just a person. Sometimes you talk to somebody about, you think they want you to talk about Parkinson's, so you start talking about Parkinson's, and you find out kind of quickly that they just want to tell you that always happens to me too. I have that same thing. I lose my keys. And I also, have trouble sleeping at night. And, oh yeah, and I shake when I get really nervous about things. At that point, you're not really talking to a person who wants to hear you talk about Parkinson's. I think I would incline toward being very choosy about who I talk. I'm talking to all of you, but we all have it. But I would be inclined to be careful, because I don't want to make myself miserable, I don't want somebody's comment, and they may mean well, really, frankly, just be something I'm going to dwell on for an entire day. Because I don't have that kind of space health-wise. None of us do. So you have to be careful. And there are people out there who really do want to know what it's like to have Parkinson's, and those are the people you should talk to. You can talk to.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That was wonderful. That's very helpful, I think, for our listeners.
Yeah, you can also tell me if I'm off track and you want to hear me talk about something else.
I'm loving hearing you talk about it all. I think you're right on track.
Okay.
Gaynor's got her hand up, and so does Sonia. So let's take.
Okay.
Go for it.
I was just going to say, you make a very interesting point about the banter and the importance of banter. I think just generally, when you've got something like this, just to any light, any joy that you can instill in a conversation, I think is, it's invaluable, and it gives you that little bit of whatever dopamine's in there, mixes it up a little bit, gives it a bit of a zhuzh. So I think you're bang on there. And if you can have that kind of rapport with anyone, but especially with, you know, with the big boy neurologist or whatever, so that you know we're on a level, and humor is a fantastic leveler. We know that this side of the pond.
We try to remember it here on this side of
I know. I've only been a team.
Over there, yeah.
The other thing I was going to say, I wanted to know, Kathleen, whether you started writing fiction post-diagnosis. I'm just curious, or were you already writing fiction?
No, I wasn't writing fiction and I wasn't painting, but now now if you asked me 10 years ago, are you ever going to be an artist? I would say, please. I was a chemist and I was, then I was a social scientist. I'm not going to be an artist. In fact, I love art, but I'm not going to be. But now I paint, and I have read about Parkinson's people who paint and how it's so common so many of us paint. And so, and no one has the answer on that. I've read some things about, well, maybe it's our medication, but I don't think that's kind of unfair to people who put a lot of time into art. Oh yes, just because I pop a pill and that's why I can, almost be Rembrandt. I don't think that's what it is. I do think that what we do, I think it's a natural inclination of the human brain, and especially if you give it a little bit of a nudge. The neuroplasticity of our brain allows us to forge new pathways if we choose to do so. And I just decided I would start painting, and I was fortunate enough to have a woman say, there's something there. And I thought that was very sweet of her. But in time, really, I've really been fortunate. Now, when it came to writing, I've always been a writer, but because of my having to be tenured and full professor and all that business, you couldn't go off and say, well, guess what? I'm also writing novels. No, that wouldn't have gotten me anywhere. But yes, I think it was about, well, maybe 15 years ago, well, maybe less, that I did the first draft of a novel. I have, maybe they aren't here, but anyway, one of them is called Shadow Campus, and it's about a woman, a young woman, female professor, who was found hanging in her office the night before the tenure decision. And she's not dead, but her brother has to fly out, and they've been estranged, but they have to uncover what's going on. And the second one's called Damned If She Does. And damn, it came out last year, which isn't a good year. This 2020 during COVID. So tell all your friends, because the word certainly hasn't gotten out about that. But I don't know, Gaynor, if there's something in particular, but I'll tell you that these, even though I still have that cognition problem and I only have maybe a couple of good hours a day, then I meditate. And I'm fortunate to have found Bernie Siegel's meditation, morning and evening meditation. I recommend it to everybody. Then I get more time. It has really given me, I don't know, like a gift to be able to do this writing. It hasn't been easy, not like my younger years, or my pre-Parkinson's years. Paintings comes to me easier than writing nowadays because of the cognitive demands of writing and editing. But it's really made a difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's a common thing that we hear, that this kind of creativity, whether it's poetry or crafty stuff or painting or whatever. I love the idea of, going, I'm a prolific painter, and, just pop a dopamine agonist and paint the front of the house, but it doesn't quite work that way, does it? Just get this done.
Yeah, well, yeah. Well, that's right. You know, I could paint the front of the house even without my dopamine, but you know, it'd probably be a little squiggly. But it's, you know, it is something that we have the capacity for creativity. Maybe all of us, I don't know, but I think it's definitely worth giving it a go, because I certainly wasn't painting landscapes. This is one of my older ones, but anyways, you know, sea scenes and I have all kinds of oh, hey, and here's the latest book, Damned If She Does, and this is the woman who keeps sexual misconduct a secret for years, and until she comes upon the body of the man who caused it all and becomes the prime suspect. So that's, yeah. I have to say, it gives me, it's very, very tough to do with Parkinson's, but it gives me a good feeling to be able to accomplish it. I bought a calligraphy set. I thought I'd give that a go now. You know, I think we should all, like, you know, decide what it is that brings you joy. And don't think you have to be good at it. And I have a website, by the way, about painting called, you know, www.paintingdoc.com, and it's for people with Parkinson's.
Fabulous. I bet Lee will put that right up for us. I'm guessing.
Yeah, I need to put more paintings up, but that is, and I've thought about maybe doing some things on writing, so people might start writing, maybe memoirs or, you know, just not. I don't know if my kids will ever read a memoir. If I do it, maybe they will, but it'll be there then if I do it.
Right.
You know, someday.
Sonia has something to add here. Love.
Well, I guess could tie in with that feeling of joy that we all seem to get from our creative endeavors. But I just wanted to take it back to what you were saying about the appointment with your movement disorder specialist or neurologist. I think that the list that you talked about is really key, because I think what happens, and I'll admit it as a physician, that we tend to treat the disease, not necessarily the patient. So, you know, if I were to increase your Cinemet and get rid of your tremor, that might be a victory on my part that I was able to reduce your tremor, but is it really a victory for you if the side effects are worse than the tremor was, or if I didn't address your constipation or anxiety, which is what's keeping you from enjoying life? And until we have a marker for Parkinson's, I think that, you know, that communication with your physician about what your quality of life goals are really important, because until there's a cure, it's all about quality of life and living well with this disease. Right. So I think that was a really good point you made. The other point was about rapport. Rapport is paramount, because this disease is all about communication. You know, like I said, we don't have a biomarker, so the physician depends on your recall of your symptoms and what you're going through and how it's affecting your quality of life in order to make management decisions. So that rapport has to be there. If you don't feel comfortable with your physician in communicating with them, then that's a problem. And people should feel, you know, it's okay if you have to go to another physician for a second opinion, or you have to go somewhere else to feel more comfortable. Your comfort and your rapport with your physician, I think, is really key. And people shouldn't feel guilty about doing that.
Absolutely. I mean, it doesn't even have to be, you know, that you're yucking it up together.
Right.
You know, just the feeling that that person cares about you. And I do think that the help you give, and you've just confirmed that, Sonia, that it helps you and it helps the doctor, because the doctor doesn't want you to go away thinking, well, we didn't deal with what I care about, you know. And so yeah, I sort of shopped around for doctors. In the doctor that I told you about that I laugh with, I didn't shop around with him. He's one of the best, because I have an autonomic condition, you know, orthostatic hypotension, and he's one of the best, and so I didn't want to lose him. And so over time, we developed the rapport. I wanted his expertise, and I think I sort of knew that we could work it out. And now we do have a really great rapport. And I also go into, I learned this with breast cancer. I used to go in with my no cards to breast cancer, to my oncologist. And he said to me, I remember one day, now he wasn't supposed to be a guy you could get along with either, but he was great eventually. And I would have my note cards. And one day he said to me, you know, those damn note cards, they drive me crazy. And I said to him, well, they're not going anywhere. And he said, nah, to be honest with you, I think you're going to survive because you really want me to cover what is important to you. And so I thought, that's pretty good. And I think he did sort of save my life, he and a couple of others, because I had lost a year and a half. That was, I'm lucky to be talking to you today.
We're lucky that you're talking to us.
That's good.
Karen, your hands up.
Yeah, I had a couple of things I wanted to bring up based on things that as a group we were talking about, and to build upon what Sonia was saying and going back to the doctor visit. As a woman, I think I've been conditioned to believe that I don't want to be annoying to the doctor. So, something's going on. I only got to see my movement disorder neurologist every year and a half, because he's so backed up. And I see a nurse practitioner in between, and maybe I have a neurologist that I see on the side. But I realized this, I wanted to adjust my medication. And I see the doctor again in March. And I thought to myself, this just happened the other day, why should I wait around for months? I mean, why not send an email on the portal and say, hey, I'd like to increase my medication. I tried it and it worked well. And I thought about how long I hem-hawed about contacting him, that I didn't want to be a bother. And the truth is, since I increased my medication a couple of days ago, it's the first time in 3 years since my diagnosis that I've been on an adequate dose. And it's not for failure of the doctor, but I mean, I almost was just brought to tears to feel what it felt like to be back into my body again as a normal feeling, because I've been walking around under medicated for fear of bothering the doctor. And I think that's just sort of this generalization about women and hysteria and midlife and that kind of thing. And that was one thing I wanted to talk about. Just the other issue about being a middle-aged woman. And, a lot of us, and as we age and our Parkinson's advances, will have the complexity of multiple conditions to deal with. And I'll bring up the lack of sleep as one example. I was getting up 7 or 8 times a night to urinate, and I thought it was Parkinson's related. And so I mentioned to the urologist, and I mean, who can sleep well when every night you're awakened at least once or twice an hour to urinate? So he sent me to a urologist. The urologist didn't think it was urologic. She thought it was not neurologic either, because it would have been happening during the day as well. And she said, had you been tested for sleep apnea? So, I finally end up with the pulmonologist, and I'm an advocate for myself and diagnosed with sleep apnea, and with proper treatment have finally gotten a good night's sleep. But it all started with a physician wanting to give me oxybutynin to stop peeing because I had overactive bladder. Well, really, I was a middle-aged woman who'd gained some weight, approaching perimenopause, developed sleep apnea, and happened to have Parkinson's and other things. So it took a team of like 4 or 5 different doctors to put the story together. But I finally got a dental appliance for sleep apnea, and I'm sleeping through the night. And finally, after 3 years of not wanting to be a bother to the physician to get an adequate dose, I feel great again. That was one thing I wanted to mention. And just on the tail end about this sort of concept of self-discovery and creativity, I started writing poetry. Now that I'm not working, and I didn't anticipate retiring at 47, but I've discovered public speaking. I was terrified to do public speaking. I actually enjoy it now, and I've made a hobby of that. And writing poetry, they're not the best poems in the world, but I do enjoy it. And the other day I was upset about something, and I thought, oh, maybe I'll just write a poem. And I did. It made my day better. But those were just some things I wanted to share with the group.
Those are real good. I'd love to see some of that poetry sometime.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give you my email.
You will be able to,
I
because
encourage
I'm
folks.
talking from the background because we're doing a poetry cafe with all of our people with Parkinson's that we do a class for. So we'll share the info with you.
Yay. Thanks,
That's
Mel.
great.
Hey, Heather, do you have something to add, love? You've been rather quiet, other than your beautiful purple shirt.
I am, well, this is a new shirt that I'm trying out that's for handicapped people with a zip on the side.
What?
Yeah, I'll tell you more about it when I get a chance. My hands aren't working to type, but the reason that I'm sort of going like this in the background when Karen says that she's found speaking and that she's doing poetry, you know, I met Karen at the Cure Parkinson's Trust at the Van Andel Institute with Gaynor, who Gaynor ended up covering for me when I couldn't even leave the hotel room on time because of dystonia and this panic that sets in when your meds aren't working. I was just so frozen that I just couldn't get moving. I was hysterical. Then I started crying and you know, everybody said, hey, if you're going to get a hall pass or for people going to understand, it's going to be this crowd. So just relax. But what happened is Karen ended up sort of stepping in and sort of covering this area that was really important. Thank you. And what I find is that we all do that. We all sort of take turns sort of, you know, picking each other up, knocking, you know, we get knocked down, we pick each other up. But what I wanted to say is about the artwork and about the poetry, it becomes less performative as we get older. The ego tends to take a back seat. We're not worried about what other people think quite as much. We still care, we GAF, if you will, but we're not so concerned with putting everything out there in a way that has to be super polished because we know we don't have time. And I want to reiterate what Kathleen said about finding her voice in different ways after diagnosis, just for the sheer pleasure of exploring new things. That's what keeps us excited, curious about life. And indeed, joy is, as I've mentioned, our birthright, joy and pleasure. So this, one more thing I wanted to add too, is many of us are neurodiversive. So we have this neurodivergence, it's rather a new buzzword, where we might have the intersection of like ADD, or some learning disability that went undiagnosed, and then Parkinson's, and then, you know, so like I said, everything's happening at once for many of us. But that creative piece, that is how we get through it. That is, it's huge. So I encourage everyone to try some creative hobby or some creative craft or whatever. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to echo too what Kathleen said, that, you know, our brain, we used to think our brain was more fixed, and what we find is that it's not fixed. We can learn and develop new things and lay down new neural pathways. We can lay them down to find joy. We can lay them down to learn a new skill. And it's actually very, very good for us, and it's good for our brain. And just like it's been really great for my brain and my spirit actually to be here with all of you today. I always learn quite a lot from everybody on the panel. And does anybody have any other questions or remarks kind of before we start to wrap up a bit? Because I feel like we've covered things pretty well. Does anybody have anything else to add to their story?
Well, first, I just want to congratulate Karen on getting past, you know, worrying about the doctor, you know, bothering the doctor. I mean, my experience with doctors is that they mostly don't mind, and what they really appreciate, those note cards do another thing too. It does the doctor a favor. I mean, we really cannot take 2 hours of somebody's time, you know. So if you really know what it is that you need help with, then that saves time also for, you won't go on and on, you know. You'll arrive prepared to talk about what it is that you want. Yeah,
Physicians can't read our minds either.
Right.
If you're having trouble with depression or urinary incontinence or sexual dysfunction or freezing or all of the things, if we're not exhibiting that right in front of them, they don't necessarily know to address it. And so we've got to be respectful of that piece too, that we have a right to advocate for ourselves, but also to not expect them to know what we're thinking.
Oh, I agree, Kat. I mean, they're just getting sort of a snapshot clinical picture. They're not seeing you in your social or home or occupational environment where you're really getting tested, and your symptoms can be very, very different in those areas. Your life experience is very different in general compared to what they see in the office. So for sure. And they can't know what your quality of life goals are. You know, for some, it may be just to walk down to the bottom of the driveway. For another person, it might be they want to go back to running marathons. So unless you express to them, this is what I need in order to live, optimize my quality of life, they can't know.
Yeah.
And you've got to be honest, otherwise it's a waste of time, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Indeed.
Like, I couldn't possibly mention my periods to my male doctor.
Well, those are especially who you need to be mentioning them to.
Oh yes, sorry, yes, you're right.
Yes. It's our job as advocates to teach them the best way to help better serve the needs of women. Well, I am what a privilege to be here with you all. Mel, do you have anything you'd like us to touch on, or how did we do here for our
Oh yeah, you did great. And I'm so glad for the people that joined us. If you're still with us, we have a really great lineup for this year. Next month, we're going to talk about medications and treatments. And then after that, we're going to talk about period, menopause and hormones, contraception and pregnancy. We have a whole list of things. So definitely join us for that. We will be recording all of these sessions. So we'll send you the recordings, the audios, the transcripts. You can watch them at your own convenience for sure. And if you like this, tell your friends. Let's get everybody here. It's a really fun group of people. And we're excited to come to you this year. And Kathleen, thank you so much for being our special guest.
I tell you, time flew by. I tell you, it's been a pleasure. I'm delighted to be with you.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, Kathleen.
Thank you for inviting me. And I'd like to get on that list, Mel, so I can follow along and see what.
Absolutely.
Join you now and then, perhaps.
Good. Well, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Bye.